So over a year ago, I played 3 small roguelike demos, and as someone who loves playing and talking about game design, I wanted to know where those games were today and see if my overall thoughts have changed after all this time. Kind of like a quick modern re-review. So let's take a look. First off, we've got Schism. This is a top-down twin-stick shooter roguelike that is pretty much going to take you through like a fever dream. The first time I played this a year ago, I remember being pretty confused and lost with a lot of the stuff that was going on. On the surface, this is a pretty straightforward game, just a basic top-down where you can just shoot with a particular gun, and that's about it. But outside of all the basic stuff you would expect from a game like this, one interesting mechanic is the color mechanic. You can see some things are blue, some things are red. And I can change my own color to red or blue, and I will be immune to whatever color I'm going to be matching. So right now, if I turn to blue, those bullets are harmless. Now, while this is pretty interesting, it by itself doesn't really make the game. The really interesting part of this game to me is the in-between stuff. Because as you can see, there's a lot of stuff over there. We've got some health, we've got some mana, we've got different weapons, we've got different actives, we've got different stats, we've got money, we've got keys, we've got stuff, we've got even more stats, we've got even more stuff here. Yeah. I remember why this game did feel fairly intimidating at first for me, but the one thing I'll say is that they have improved a lot on the UI and some of the explanation, which I think really helps for a game like this that is so focused on all the little details. Now, obviously, I won't get into too many details for all the unique mechanics, but one thing I'll talk about that I think is really, really cool from the start is the belief system, I think is what it's called. Every time you start a new run, you're going to find one of these rooms right here, and you're going to be offered 3 possible gods to choose from. These gods will provide very specific bonuses and sometimes even negatives, but they're a way for the player to kind of already start strategizing as to what kind of build they want to try to go for. For instance, this hunting god gives more crit damage and range, but I won't have any more gun shops throughout the run. Every time I do a crit, this god kind of scales like every other god, which is a really cool mechanic. It allows players to try to focus on something from the very start and allow unique builds every single run. All in all, if I had to actually compare this game to any other game, it would probably be Tiny Rogues. Both fairly simple visually and mechanically from a gameplay standpoint, while still allowing players to create some ridiculous and crazy builds every single run. I think the boss fights are really interesting and pretty straightforward, but really try to use the whole color mechanic to its full advantage to make things more interesting. Every time you level up, you don't just choose from a couple of possible stats. No, you choose from 8 different stats that all do different things. So it's kind of cool that even though leveling up is pretty straightforward, you always know what to expect. There's a lot of different things you can go for every single run, which I really like. Now, all that being said, even though the UI looks better, just like Tiny Rogues, throughout all the different updates, the game did get even more complicated. And even after having played for many hours, when I see things like this, oh boy. Now, pre-update, I believe there was even more information because you can see to hold Alt. Yeah, we're just getting started. I do believe they made it a little easier to read in general by having the extra button to get more information, but this is still a game that does require a bit of focus. That being said, once you start really understanding how the game works, man, there are some crazy things you can do in this game. For instance, having all these guns being the same, but all with drastically different stats. There is a surprising amount of content. This game has gotten a lot of updates since I first played it. We've got hundreds of items that do drastically different things and can really impact every single run individually. Bunch of cards, all these gods to start the run. If I was stuck having to play a particular game for a very long time, this could definitely be one of them. Also, I love the transition screen from one level to another. It's a nice touch. Now, from a gameplay standpoint, one of my favorite additions to this game is the pre-battle setup. This room right here is going to be a battle, but the game allows me to kind of position myself accordingly before the fight, allowing players to actually strategize their combat before getting started. It's a nice little addition that I really haven't seen many games use. This game is crazy chaotic. Even after having played it for a while, you're still not really supposed to understand absolutely everything that's going on. At least that's how I see it. I still can't fully wrap my head around why my builds do well sometimes and sometimes don't. But sometimes that's kind of part of the fun. Each combat room starts with a frozen enemy. Its ally gets 200 plus 10% in-clan faith, and frozen allies deal damage, and frozen allies can also be pushed. Reform somewhere in the room if killed. I think that's good. Don't get me wrong, I do like the chaos, but I do kind of wish that things could be a little simpler here and there. With the amount of stuff that you're going to be encountering between all the different NPCs, chests, events, you're going to be spending a lot of time on a single floor. And that's kind of similar to Isaac in that regard, where you're really constantly going back and forth trying to figure out what you want to do next, which is a big compliment. Similar to Isaac, knowledge is key in a game like this, which can feel very rewarding if you actually know what to do. Also, just to be clear, not every item is crazy complicated, as you can see. And similar to Isaac, I would say that the gameplay is, to me, not the most interesting part. It's interesting for sure, there's a lot going on as you can see, but it's more so the possibility to completely break the game through doing a bunch of different actions and getting the right kind of item combinations that really intrigues me. The last run I've beaten, I genuinely had no idea why I was so strong. I did not know, I didn't fully understand what the hell was going on, and that was fine. It was really fun. Alright, let's see if I actually have a strong build. I'm not too sure. Oh gosh, no, I am not dealing any damage to this thing. Uh-oh. Help! Help! Move up. I'm dead. Every time you do a run, you get money, and you can actually use a few things in the hub for the money. You can gamble away some stuff to make your next run potentially stronger. You can buy an item. One thing I actually really like is the tip guy. Usually, you know, sometimes you get tips in games, but a lot of times, yeah, obviously, you understand. But with a game like this, the tips are genuinely really useful. Most bullets ricochet if they hit walls. I actually didn't know that. Another really nice thing about this game is that this is a game that really holds a lot of secrets. Just the fact that, for instance, in the hub, I have this thing right here that's all blue. Last run, it was red. I'm not too sure why, but it intrigues me. In that regard, it kind of reminds me of Star of Providence, where I always feel like there's just so many things hidden that I haven't even scratched the surface of, which is really cool. There's just so much to do and to explore in this game, and if you can get past the intimidating first few hours, honestly, this game is a wild adventure. And with the much cleaner UI and all the new additions added since the last time I played, new elites, new status effects, new consumables, new mechanics, honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the amount of stuff added since last time. So if you're interested in a crazy adventure, I would honestly recommend trying this game out. Next up is Commander Tiberius Troubleson. This is a 2D action platformer roguelite with a heavy focus on adventure and exploration. I remember the first time I played this game over a year ago, what caught my attention originally was the visuals and how much of a Risk of Rain 1 vibe it gave me. But while it does take heavy inspiration from it, I will say that honestly, the visuals look absolutely amazing in this game. The art and the music with the overall just super soothing and relaxing vibe. Ugh. Now, one of the biggest differences from Risk of Rain in this game is the way the gameplay actually works. Here, you have a gun and you can just kind of shoot left and right, and that's about it. There's not much else to do in terms of aggression with your weapons. There is this little repel mechanic here, which is actually pretty cool. You can jump, you can dash, you can go down. It kind of does like an area of effect, but you don't actually have new weapons or different abilities to find or to choose from at the start of a run, just like in Risk of Rain. Instead, the game gives you spells, these little guys right there. You end up having an inventory full of these kind of consumable spells, and you can use them whenever you want. Now, one of the biggest differences with the actual demo was that the demo, these spells cost mana and sometimes health to use. So even though they were consumables, they still kind of required you to spend resources on them, which I remember personally I wasn't a huge fan of, and I'm happy to see that in this full version, that's not the case anymore. You can kind of just use them. So if I want to use these ice missiles, I can do so without having to worry about any mana bar or health bar, which is really nice. And just like most other roguelikes, you also have your basic passive upgrades, such as, you know, after casting a specific kind of spell, something happens. In Risk of Rain, you tend to really have a ton of these by the end of a run. Here, they're much more limited, and the game focuses a lot more on spells versus the actual passive upgrades you'll be finding throughout the runs. Gosh, just look at how satisfying it is to just pick up currency and stuff like that. Ugh, I love it. Now, once again, the game does kind of prioritize exploration and adventure overall, such as like these having like little secret rooms here and there. Instead of going through a bunch of random levels, these are actually handcrafted, and you have this whole progression and adventure that you're trying to go pretty much right here. So it really does try to push this whole, you know, adventure side. One thing I do remember from playing the demo is that this game was really hard. But again, differently than Risk of Rain 1, this is a roguelite, and upgrading your passive abilities here is going to be really necessary. I wasn't sure if they were planning on adding more stuff to this hub here, but honestly, I kind of like the emptiness. It's just, once again, really relaxing, which I think fits with the overall vibe of the game. But I've got to say, even though this is not Risk of Rain, I was a little bit sad to realize that there was no different kind of weapons that you could actually equip, because eventually, after you play a lot this game, the spells are very unique and there's a bunch of them, but your gun is always the same, which I do feel is a bit of a shame. Obviously, it's a lot of work, but it is something I was kind of wondering if it was going to be implemented in the full release. The thing about the gun is that, for instance, right here, you can see that I'm hitting this wall, and if there's an enemy above here that is right here, for instance, it's kind of awkward to hit them because it's just going purely horizontally. Spells are great at dealing with enemies like this, but your gun, not so much. So sometimes you're going to be in situations where you're going to have to kind of jump around just trying to hit something that's awkwardly placed. And I feel like that is still kind of the case in this full release. But at least spells are easier to use constantly, so it's not as problematic as it was when I first played it, in my opinion. One interesting addition to the full release is that this little upgrade right here is actually the running, which in the demo was a button that you could press, but upon realizing that, you know, you probably just always want to run, might as well just unlock it and make it official, and now you can run, yay! The core gameplay and mechanics are really nice. As you can see, we can triple jump and triple dash in between, which gives you a lot of mobility and a lot of opportunities to do different things in combat and exploration, which is really nice for a game that has a lot of secrets. Ooh. Now, even though I'm really happy that there isn't kind of like a mana system anymore to have to worry about, once you do end up using all of one spell, for instance right here, and I'm out of spells here, you still do have to go into your inventory to just swap to a new spell. So here I can switch it to this, and I can use this new spell. I kind of wish there was more of like an automated way to just cycle through spells so you don't have to just kind of stop the pacing. But now that there isn't mana anymore, that blue bar down there is still actually considered mana, but instead of using it for spells, what ends up happening is that if you fill it up to the full, you get a gem that you can now use for these kind of permanent additions to add to your run, which is a really nice touch. Increase all elemental damage. Let's do it. Look at this biome. Isn't it beautiful? One very nice feature is the zoom mechanic right here, because as you may have noticed, it is pretty zoomed out, and you can zoom in things to get a little closer and see what's going on. Now, obviously, that means you can't see the map as clearly, but it is a really nice addition because it can be a little hard to see what's going on at times. Not to mention that, once again, this game is pretty challenging, and enemies attack very quickly, and some enemy attacks can be pretty rough. So, for instance, all these drone guys, I hate them. I remember hating them during the demo, and I still hate them here. They lock onto you from very far away like this, and sometimes it's kind of hard to see that little red mark, and if you take damage from them, health is pretty hard to get by in this game. So having to fight a bunch of enemies down here while still being attacked by this drone that always laser focused on me from very far away can be a lot. A lot of enemies, especially further on, are going to be very similar like this, where attacks are very quick and sometimes very hard to dodge, especially since you can't really attack them very easily, considering that you're very limited with your movesets. Honestly, overall, coming back to this game has been a really enjoyable experience to me. I do wish there was a little bit more to play with in terms of like your weapon and the fact that I can't really shoot more than just next to me, making some combat situations pretty awkward. While the full release does look fairly similar to the demo, the whole spell revamp system where you're able to use them way more often is a much more enjoyable experience. Also, I don't know if you were able to shoot from ropes before. Maybe. For anyone who's interested in trying a 2D action platformer roguelite with a really, really cool sense of adventure and immersion, I would say give Commander Tiberius Troubleson a try. Ow. Next up is Blood Dome 99. This is a bullet heaven, or what I like to call a horde-like. This was another game that caught my attention for its very unique visuals. Now, obviously, I had played a lot of horde-likes back then, but since then, I've actually played a lot more. So I find it interesting to come back to this game with a different perspective. So in this horde-like, you actually start with a choice of 3 possible weapons to choose from, and instead of just trying to upgrade your character, you're mostly going to be focusing on upgrading your weapons. This is a game that kind of prioritizes trying to evolve the weapons you're using versus just making you stronger. Now, just like how it was when I first played this game, the splattering of the blood and the very simple visuals I find fantastic. In terms of Horde-likes, it's one that is quite slow to get started, I would say. Even from the very first upgrades you see here, they're actually all very straightforward and nothing too crazy out there. And the way the leveling up works is that you collect these XP points, and not only do you get XP to get to these levels right here, but you also get money separately. And the goal of the game is to actually get to $300,000. But as you can see, everything costs money, so you have to make a decision as to how much money you want to spend versus keep in order to try to beat the run, which is actually quite unique of a system. Now, not only do I think that the upgrades are a little slow to get started, but also, as you can see, the gameplay itself is very slow for a Horde-like. My movement is pretty slow. I have a dash, but with a very long cooldown, and enemies in general are usually not a huge threat for a while. All things considered, it's a pretty relaxing experience for that kind of game overall. There you go, our first actual gun upgrade. Increase SMG damage and bullet size. Pretty straightforward. Now, instead of finding more weapons through leveling up, you're on a timer until a new weapon is dropped on you, and then you could actually pick one of 3 possible weapons to add to your arsenal. Let's take the bubble blower. That sounds fun. And now I shoot both my SMG and our little bubbles. Yay! This kind of system isn't anything too crazy new, but it's not the most common way of doing these games, I would say. Projectile bounce off an additional target. Nice. Most Horde-likes out there, they'll prioritize just number adjustments, you know, like 10%, blah, 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 5%, blah, blah. But here, as you can see, all of those are really interesting. And the more you play, the more you realize you can actually create some pretty unique builds with specific things, like the Blade Runner, dashing, dealing damage, and then you could try to do like a dash build with specific weapons that also can't synergize with it. It's really cool. They've really put a lot of effort into making sure that every weapon has a lot of unique upgrades to come with it. So every single run, depending on the weapon you find, you're going to end up creating some pretty unique runs just because of the unique upgrades you'll be encountering, such as this one. Now, obviously, just to get back to the visuals, it is very minimalistic. And I could completely understand if people don't like this kind of style, because obviously the enemy diversity is not massive, and none of them do really unique mechanics or things that you really have to watch out for. But in this case, it doesn't really bother me that much, because it's clear that the game really focuses on the gameplay, and the gameplay really delivers. That being said, while the visuals are minimalistic, what it does do is really help be able to figure out what is going on, even if it's really chaotic. There are so many Horde-likes I've played recently that are really good, but can very easily get visually confusing. But since this is a top-down with very clear sprites, it's actually quite easy to keep track of everything. Not to mention that the HUD, which we'll get to in a moment, also offers a lot of accessibility options. Now, one thing that I still find fairly weird is this whole goal where you have to reach $300,000. It's very unique, something I have not seen Horde-likes do. But on the flip side, it means that if I want to spend $50,000 on this awesome looking upgrade, it's gonna set me back on my goal, which I'm still a little mixed on. It's cool that there's kind of a strategy involved where you don't just have to pick the strongest upgrade, but it's also kind of sad that the stronger you are does not mean that the better you're going to end up doing, since the goal is to just finish as fast as possible and not kill as many things as possible. At the end of the run, it doesn't really matter how many things you've killed and how much money you've made. It's just a matter of getting to that 300 as fast as possible and killing the boss. Speaking of the boss, when I first played it, obviously there was only one boss available. Also, I can't really see much here. Those bubbles are pretty intense. But yeah, originally there was only one boss that you could fight, and now there's quite a few, which is quite nice. They have pretty straightforward, mechanics, evade the purple things, just like every single other purple thing is bad in this game. Again, I really like the fact that it's very clear what is bad and what is good. Come on, almost there. You're so low, and so am I. Woo! I'm the champion! But there you go. You can see how much you made, and then you actually come back with the money that you can use for meta progression. That being said, once again, the end screen is just a timer. It doesn't matter how much money you made or how much damage you dealt. It's all about the time, which I find a little disappointing. Not to mention, there's no stats. I don't know how much damage my weapons did. I always feel like every single Horde-like should have stats to tell you how much damage the things you got did. Now back at the hub, there's a lot of things here. Originally, there was just 2 rooms and this room didn't have much. Now there's 3 rooms and there's even a secret area down here that I still have not figured out how to open, which is exciting. There's once again your accessibility stuff right here, your compendium for if you want to check out any specific weapons or perks, considering that again, they're all pretty unique. You can enable different kinds of hard modes. One aspect that's really cool is that you can start with any weapon in the game at the start of a run, but you have to pay the price of the actual weapon. So you're in debt, but you start with a stronger weapon, which is really cool. That being said, the meta progression in this game does not actually include power meta progression. It's just unlocks. You've got your cosmetics, you've got your different music, and of course new guns and different unlocks that allow you to get to another room in the hub. But in terms of gameplay, this is mostly a skill-based game where you have to pick the right choices and not get caught too much, which honestly there's not that many Roguelikes that do that these days, so I kind of like that. Now of course the biggest addition to the full release are the different levels. Originally there was just 1 level, now we've got the Savage Street and Choppy's Slaughterhouse. Ultimately they don't really change too much in my experience. You have different bosses, you have different enemies, and the map is a little different, but again the game is so focused on gameplay that to me it's not super important. It's a very nice addition, but it's not the most important thing to me. In addition to the new levels, they also did include an endless mode, which obviously does make the final goal not be the money anymore, which is nice, but it's just not the main thing of the game. I gotta say, I do really like the aesthetics of the second level though. Being able to make something look so good while pretty much only having purple is pretty cool. Oh, and in case it wasn't already obvious, the sound design and music is also really, really nice and very fitting of this kind of genre and style that they're going for. There's an announcer that every now and then just starts yelling things, and it's very comedic.
You're doing so well, but these walls need more.
One thing they did note is that they actually did add a lot more announcer lines. That is such a good update. Of course, they also added better visuals, more content overall with new weapons, new perks, all that stuff. I mean, Roguelikes usually do really like updates in order to just add more things to play with, considering that the gameplay is pretty straightforward. They also added a bunch more achievements, which this is very much one of those Roguelikes where every single run when you start playing this game, you're gonna be receiving so many achievements once you're done that it just feels really good to go back to the hub, see the achievements, and actually use them to unlock more stuff. All right, now my bouncing billiard balls also explode. Lovely. Also, one thing I wanted to touch on before finishing up. There is no good way of healing in this game. So taking damage is pretty bad in general, which does once again try to push players to be more careful and ultimately makes this a bit more of a challenge in Horde-like just because of its actual mechanic of not really being able to heal. So you do have to be constantly careful what you're doing, even if you have a very, very strong build. Honestly, coming back to Blood Dome 99 was a really fun time. If anybody finds these kinds of visuals interesting versus boring, then I think it should really be a game you should try. The upgrade system is really solid with a ton of unique things to choose from, and the builds constantly feel different from one another. While I may not be a huge fan of the whole goal of just getting a bunch of money and not having any stats at the end, ultimately the gameplay is just enjoyable enough for me to want to pick this game up again and just experiment with more guns and builds. With slow gameplay but thought-provoking upgrades, it's honestly a good blend of chill but also exciting gameplay. And if that sounds interesting to you, then I would recommend trying this one out.